to the city attorney, I switch it.
Yes.
Well, she had a big part of this, right?
Yeah, she helped with the setup.
Hey, Greg. Greg,
Yes.
looks like I'm at your seat here in my seat.
Which one?
Our name tags, look at our name tags on the side.
Oh, I got switched.
That's for staff.
Okay.
How do you feel about that?
Do we have everybody? 1, 2, yes. 1, 2, 3.
I'm kind of nervous about that.
What's up with the boom? I don't know. Because it's got to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
Do we need a bigger plaque or it needs to move?
Yeah, so I used to be on this side.
We'll see.
Remember sharing.
Why did you switch? Maybe I was causing too much problems. Too much talking. Now I'm next to you. Yeah, so.
Hey.
Keep you out of trouble.
Yeah.
Pull that mic a little closer.
Yeah, he. I could see him. He would do that.
It was fun.
It's like a mountain.
Yeah, you've got some good stories. You could write
A book.
a chapter.
Short chapter. How do you know? Depends upon what stuff you want to tell. Got your IT certificate?
That's how I can do it.
You know why that is? Because we got the longer stick, they got the short stick.
Are you Mayor?
All right, 6 o'clock.
Let's call the Appropriations Committee meeting of Tuesday, October 7th to order. Call the roll.
Alderman Strelchak?
Here?
Alderman Talaco?
Here.
Alderman Meyer?
Here.
Alderman Hancher?
Here.
Alderman Bach?
Here.
Alderman Parrish?
Here.
Alderman Brandt?
Here.
Alderman Gebhardt?
Here.
And Mayor Nervin.
Here. Let's please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to
The flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So welcome this evening and welcome to our new council chambers. It's a slight upgrade from the old digs. And a functioning screen that you can see from across the Milwaukee River on the other side if the doors are open. So with that, I'm just going to hand it over to Administrator Jones to walk us through the budget overview of the revenues and capital projects, and then we'll just take questions as we go.
Okay, fair enough. Members of the council serving as our Appropriations Committee, again, welcome. Piggybacking off of Mayor Nervin's comments, we are glad and proud to be back in Christine Nurnberg Hall, which underwent renovations over the last 6 months or so, beginning in early April. And so we've been over at the Legion Hall now for a number of meetings, and it's great to be back in this new and expanded and renovated space. We want to celebrate the occasion here tonight. We've got a little cake and a little champagne, which we're hoping all of you will join us in partaking in after we're done here with our Appropriations Committee meeting. We want to christen the new room and celebrate appropriately. Thank you to the budget team for pulling that together. And this is not the only thing that's new and what's going on here in Mequon. And if we just kind of take a look, that's the brand new restroom and concession facility that was completed earlier this summer out at Lemke Park. And that supports one of our strategic initiatives, customer service. You could also argue quality of life in terms of providing additional amenities at one of our flagship parks here in Mequon. We're also celebrating the opening of a new interchange at Mequon Road. As you'll recall, we had 5 interchanges that were rebuilt as part of the I-43 reconstruction project. Mequon Road was the last of the interchanges to be completed. And as we all know, that reopened for business here earlier this year. Our brand-new fire department, the Southern Ozaki Fire and EMS Department, gathered back in the spring to put together a brand-new strategic plan that's going to guide the work of our joint fire department with our friends in Thiensville over the next 5 years between 2026 and 2030. We also have the new solar panels that were recently installed at the library just to our north. As the council and members of the Appropriations Committee will recall, this project was made possible with a contribution from the city from the ARPA funds that were designated for use by the library over the last couple of years. We also, as you know, over the last couple of meetings, purchased a brand new street sweeper. This is not an inexpensive vehicle. It's a more robust vehicle within our overall DPW fleet. And we'll be talking a little bit more about that as we go through the presentation tonight. We also have a new program that we've started with Ozaki County. You see Officer Sean Larson from the police department standing with a couple of our partners from the Ozaki County Sheriff's Office. This is the critical responder unit, which is going to help us address mental health crises that individuals both here in Mequon and throughout Ozaki County are suffering that take up a lot of time for our law enforcement personnel as well as law enforcement personnel throughout the county. So that's a brand new program just kicking off this year. You can see the newly paved Zedler Lane, which rolls by the newly expanded parking lot at Catherine Kearney Park. That's going to be a great driving surface for residents on the east side of town. And as we pick up the road program next year, we'll be jogging that leg up north on Lakeshore Drive. We were over at the Legion Hall a couple of weeks ago working on a new master plan for our civic campus. And so that's going to be on the agenda at our committee of the whole meeting next week, where the Lakota group is going to be here in this room presenting a report on all of the outreach and the concepts that have been discussed and shared with the community over the last several months. And then lastly, here's a picture of the brush site, which is currently under construction, but also another new project that staff and the city and the organization and certainly the council have been working on over the last number of years. We expect the brush site to be completed by the end of this year so that it's open and ready and operating 7 days a week starting next year in the 2026 season. So we're in a new council chambers, but there's a lot of other new stuff that's been going on here in the city. And just wanted to make sure that we pointed out some of the other great accomplishments that our city staff team, our commissions, our boards, and certainly our elected officials gathered here tonight have been working on and supporting over the last number of years. And as I mentioned at the outset, all of these have been driven by our strategic plan. And you can see the 5 pillars, which really support a lot of the efforts that we do on a day in and day out basis, as well as an annual basis relative to our budgeting process. You can see the 3 building blocks: public safety, financial stewardship, and capital improvements. And that leads to initiatives that we pursue in customer service and ultimately quality of life. What you saw in those slides really dealt with public safety, capital improvements, customer service, and quality of life. What you didn't see on a lot of those slides was financial stewardship. That's the boring stuff. That's what we're here to do tonight. Put together the spending plan for next year. And so fiscal stewardship, like any good business, and we're a corporation, we've got to make sure that our expenditures match our revenues so that we can produce a balanced budget. We need to drive growth appropriately so that we're expanding our revenue base. We want to identify efficiencies and exercise appropriate control of our expenses. We want to ensure a robust workforce because nothing gets done without people. Police, fire, public works, all really good examples. Human-intensive endeavors, 24/7, 365. Stable pricing is another key component to any successful business. In our case, that's making sure we have a stable tax rate and stable fees that are market competitive. At the end of the day, we want to ensure profitability. We want to end the year in the black so as to promote long-term sustainability. And lastly, we want to maintain a strong financial position into the future, and we do that through our reserves and through our fund balance. So this is fiscal stewardship. This is what we're here to do tonight. This is the fifth column or pillar of the strategic plan. And, we're going to be presenting a very straightforward budget that continues to support all of those other efforts and beyond, which we saw momentarily ago on the screen. So as we kicked off the budget development process here for 2026, we adhered as a budget team, and certainly the department's heads, to the priorities that have helped guide the development of our budgets in past years. That's fulfilling salary and benefit obligations, which are roughly 70% of our operating budget. We've addressed, where possible, operational and compulsory needs, i.e. inflation and other mandates that we have to fit in to our annual spending plan. We have boosted pay-as-you-go capital funding, and we'll get into that a little later as we move through the presentation. And we're looking to preserve revenue capacity into future years. And then where possible, we look to incorporate supplemental funding requests. We've got some money coming back on the ARPA side. We'll talk a little bit about that towards the end of the presentation. There's an opportunity to reallocate some of those funds to some other one-time expenses. We're certainly looking to engage the council on that here this evening and to get some thoughts and ideas so that we can amend that plan appropriately. So I'll stop there before we get into the nuts and bolts of the budget and see if there are any questions.
Going once,
Okay.
going twice. All right, keep going.
All right, here we go. And this is an overview of the general fund. And this was included in the transmittal letter that was laid on top of the budget that was distributed about 10 days ago. And as you can see on the screen, the general fund across all revenue categories is projected to increase by 2.5%, which roughly speaking is in line with where inflation is or has been over the last number of months. I think currently the CPI is about 2.7%. And you can see in the far right-hand column, property taxes will be up 2.9% in this budget. State revenue is growing by a little greater percentage. We're seeing a drop in a couple of our intergovernmental revenue sources, and then public safety fees, we're anticipating a small increase of under $20,000 in that category. Charges for service and other revenues are also looking to increase going into the next year. And we're actually holding interest income steady because we've started to see a decline in interest rates. We expect the Fed to cut again here in October, and there will likely be some rate cutting going into next year. During the second quarter financial report that was shared with the Finance and Personnel Committee, we'd already exceeded the amount that we had budgeted for this year, and we will likely finish the year with interest income probably in the neighborhood of $400,000 to $450,000. So we think keeping that number flat, we're going to be able to hit it and then some going into next year, despite the rate cuts that we're otherwise expecting. So relative to the slide that I shared, net new construction, which is the amount that we can raise property taxes by, is up for next year by 0.74%. And that gave us about $160,000 of tax levy money to work with. Most of the non-tax revenue line items are either flat or declining slightly in the budget. Building permits are down just a little, licenses are mainly flat, and as I mentioned, interest income is staying flat. We're seeing some increases in the shared revenue from the state of Wisconsin, as well as permit revenue. We're anticipating a higher charge and more usage on the brush site next year, so we've increased those numbers. Two new sources of revenue for next year include a rent payment from the Southern Ozaki Fire and EMS Department to the city. The first year rent payment is $10,000. We would anticipate that that figure will increase over time, but we wanted to get a start in line with the intergovernmental agreement that was executed a couple of years ago. We're also incorporating a line to recapture some of our administrative costs for the 3 tax increment financing districts that we operate, TIDS 3, TIDS 4, and TIDS 5. I'll talk a little bit more about that momentarily. And then our fund balance at the end of 2024 was just over $2 million, which gives us roughly 12% of our operating costs on an annual basis. And that number, 11.9%, is within our fund balance policy of 10 to 12% of annual operating revenues. As I mentioned, we're budgeting, and this was in the budget documents distributed to the council, we are budgeting $75,000 to recoup administrative costs that we incur on an annual basis for administering our TID tax increment financing districts. This has never been done here in the city, but as you can see, in Ozaukee County, 5 other communities recoup their administrative expenses, including Thiensville, which has 1 tax increment financing district. They charged back $67,000 to their tax increment district in 2024. You can see some other municipalities that we surveyed. All of this information is publicly available. Franklin, Germantown, Greendale, Middleton, and Whitefish Bay stood out to the budget team, and you can see the numbers and the number of TID districts and the amount of expenses that are being charged back to their respective districts. The amount that we're putting in the budget, $75,000, is split evenly amongst our 3 tax increment districts, and the budgeted amount for each district is $25,000. Alderman Strelchuk.
How did you come to the $75,000 expense versus some of these higher ones that we're seeing?
Well, we have never done this before, and some of these TID districts have been in existence for a number of years. TID 3, for example, is coming up to closing in the next couple of years. We've never tracked this amount of money across the entire organization, and we wanted to be conservative in terms of the amounts that we put in the budget. We didn't want to go pie in the sky and then have a number that we couldn't otherwise meet. And this will account for both staff time and legal time that the city attorney will spend on any one of these districts. And we'll talk about the city attorney and the legal expenses. Those are going to be going up next year with his new firm and his new agreement. And we're going to have to recoup some of those costs, and this is one way to do it.
Thank you.
Any questions on the TID administrative fee?
I think it's a good foothold in, and if we want to track it more diligently and adjust that going forward, we can, but there's no basis because no one's kept track of their time.
Yeah.
If I was Middleton, I'd be worried that charging $250,000 a TIF district, it seems a little harsh.
Well,
But maybe they spend a lot of time on them, I don't know. It's an oddly round number too.
they're very proactive on the economic development front. So there's probably a lot of activity occurring there. The 2 guides that we really used, aside from Thiensville, were Greendale and Whitefish Bay. You can see Whitefish Bay is recouping about $30,000 on each of their TID districts. Greendale had $25,000 coming back on 3 of their districts and about $10,000 coming back on the other 2 districts. So we really use those as guides. And our neighbor to the immediate west, Germantown, you can see they're clicking along at about $1.20, $1.10, $1.20 per TID district. So this is something that a lot of other communities are doing that we have never done. On the expense side, this matches up dollar for dollar with the revenues. You can also see a 2.5% increase. And the net change is up just north of $460,000. Salaries are going up just under $100,000. Benefit costs are actually coming down. And then materials and supplies and purchase services and the library and the fire and EMS grant are all going up. One note for the council is this 181 number here. It's not showing up on the screen. The 181 number for the fire and EMS grant, that includes the capital portion of their contribution. So we're moving Typically, in the last number of years, they've gotten $110,000 from the city as a capital contribution, and we've included in that in the capital portion of the tax levy. We are now moving that capital contribution into their annual contribution, so it's all one lump sum rather than them getting money from one source, the general fund, and another source, our capital fund. That's why you see that large increase there for 2026. The library is also getting an increase equivalent to $25,000. This budget absorbs the new squad body camera and taser contract that we approved a year ago. The council may recall we had some money on hand to pay the first year of that contract, which is about $97,000. We're paying for all of that, and that's being incorporated into the budget for next year. With Attorney Sadak moving firms, we've increased the legal services budget by about $20,000 as we move to an hourly rate versus a retainer-style agreement. Other compulsory increases included in the budget document that were also incorporated into the budget are just shy of $60,000 and look to fulfill all of the mandated and contractual obligations that we were otherwise hearing about from the respective departments across the organization. One other step we took on the expense control side is under public officials' liability. We were currently paying, we actually currently are now paying $62,000 a year in premium for public officials' liability coverage. To my knowledge, we've never used that insurance policy in the time that I've served as city administrator. $62,000 is a lot of money to ensure that Alderman Meyer and Alderwoman Talaco and Mayor Nurbin are not doing anything nefarious in their roles as public officials, and that we as staff are not doing things that are going to put the community or the organization at risk. By increasing our deductible from $10,000 to $50,000, we're saving $50,000 a year. We're still maintaining the $10 million worth of blanket coverage that we have should, God forbid, we ever get a lawsuit claiming that Alderman Gebhardt took money on the down low. But that's going to save us $50,000 next year and every year thereafter and beyond. And that money is going to accrue to the bottom line, and we're still going to maintain the coverage. So we thought that was a no-brainer to include in the budget, because that's not something that we're typically filing claims on. Knock on wood. Health insurance premiums, they're going up by 2.5%. The last couple of years, we've had 8% and 9% increases, so that's certainly working in our favor. We're also reducing our full-time equivalents by 3/4 of one full-time equivalent. We're eliminating one of the records specialists in the police department. As the council will recall, when we merged dispatch operations with Ozaukee County, no one was put out of a job. We kept all of our former dispatchers to work as records specialists in the police department. Over the last year, we've had one full-time and one part-time position vacant. And so in order to help absorb that $100,000 contract at the very top of the screen, we are eliminating the full-time position and keeping the part-time position. That still gives us 3.5 records specialists to provide administrative support to the police department for all of their day-to-day needs from a record-keeping perspective and a law enforcement perspective. Those record specialists are also supported by 2 administrative assistants that work in the chief's office for the police department. So I feel like relative to our other departments, they have adequate administrative support such that we can make this move here this year. We're also increasing the part-time deputy clerk position to a full-time status. Over the last year, with some of the vacancies that we've had in other departments, we've used this position as a swing employee to provide administrative support in the Public Works Department, in the Community Development Department, and now in the City Administrator's Office. And we feel it's to the benefit of the organization across the board to have one employee that we can borrow on an as-needed basis to provide additional support when we have a vacancy, when we have an employee that may be out due to illness on an extended basis, or any other need which may require a short-term surge on the administrative end. And then the budget also includes equitable wage adjustments across the city's police department, our fire department with Thiensville, and the rest of the city workforce. You'll recall the collective bargaining agreement that we approved back in January accounts for a 3.5% wage adjustment for the police officers starting next year. That's also included in the fire and EMS budget for SOFD, and we have the ability for city employees to earn up to 3.5% through our hybrid pay plan adopted last year. So we've got wage equity across the board. On the capital financing side, requests for 2026 were up almost $500,000 on a combined basis between our debt service and our pay-as-you-go funding. We're at about $4.5 million along next year's spend. That includes $2.8 million in debt service and then about $1.75 million in pay-as-you-go funding, which is up about $275,000 in one-time contributions because we went through a reval and we want to maintain a level tax rate. As you'll recall, we engaged in a debt issue earlier this year for roads, this chamber project, as well as the brush site. Next year, 2026, will be year 2 of 3 for the road projects. So we've got about $2 million that we'll have for road improvements and road projects that we'll be moving forward on. And I believe we'll be having the consultant that we hired back in the summer coming back to us at a committee of the whole meeting next month to talk about design options for Lakeshore Drive and then the eastern leg of Mequon Road. As I mentioned, ARPA projects for 2026 will be wrapping up the land management system, probably in the first to second quarter of next year, and then some to be determined spending that we'll talk about a little later here tonight. Here's just a quick overview of the capital funding on a year-over-year basis. You can see that road maintenance, building repairs, and police vehicles and equipment are static amounts over the 2-year period. We're increasing the public works vehicles and equipment funding by almost $200,000. We've got the ability on a one-time basis here to help pay down the lease that we took out for that street sweeper. Currently, we're paying 4.99% interest on that lease, and we would like to pay that down sooner rather than later so that we can save between $35,000 and $40,000 in interest costs. So we're increasing that amount to help stair-step that lease obligation down significantly here in 2026. The SOFD board approved a $20,000 increase in capital funding for the city, and so that's reflected in the contribution that I talked about just a few minutes ago. And then we are including $110,000 under IT and computer replacement funding to replace the entire city server system. It's about 7 years old. We have some vulnerabilities that we've identified working with our IT staff as well as our consultant who helped us put together our 5-year strategic plan. And we want to make sure we get ahead on this project and that we're not reacting like some jurisdictions and some businesses unfortunately have when they don't have adequate hardware and backup systems in place to prevent activity that could be very harmful to the organization. We've also included, as you can see at the bottom of the screen, some money for major and secondary drainage. We're seeing a little bit of growth in the list of concerns and calls that we received in the wake of the August storms. So we want to provide some project funding to get some of those initiatives on the drawing board for 26 and beyond. And then we are replacing or hoping to replace a long obsolete fleet management software program. If I'm not mistaken, that dates all the way back to the 1980s, Director Lundin. It's really old software, and we want to bring it up so that it interfaces with the rest of our financial reporting system through Munis. And so that's going to be a project that we kick off probably as we're wrapping up the LMS portion of that project. Moving on to the library and the fire department quickly, the mayor and I met with our partners with the village, or our counterparts rather, in the village of Thiensville, and the library director twice this past summer to review current funding levels and discuss future contributions. The library had met with the budget team back in late August and initially requested $40,000 for next year. The 2026 budget, as I had pointed out earlier, includes a $25,000 increase for next year. Thiensville has agreed to contribute $3,000 for next year, and that actually includes, or is actually in the form of, a phased elimination of the fiscal agent fee over 3 years. Currently, that number is $8,500 in the library's budget. Thiensville is going to eliminate that fee, and their contribution or reduction of that fee will equal the $3,000 that you see there on the screen. So we've gotten to a point where they've agreed to eliminate the fiscal agent fee. And from, a proportional basis, you look at the $25,000 and the $3,000, for every $8 we're contributing, they're contributing $1. So we think that's a pretty good ratio relative to population, relative to circulation. Longer term, we want to get a permanent funding agreement in place. There's some other things that are factoring into those discussions, such as our shared school resource officer, such as the Southern Ozaki Fire and EMS agreement, which is going to be up for renewal after 2027. And we're going to be talking about some other opportunities relative to parks and so forth with our partners. So we're going to be looking to wrap an equitable funding arrangement longer term into a larger discussion that goes beyond just the library. We'll probably be reporting out more on that as we head into the fourth quarter and the first quarter of next year. For the Southern Ozaki Fire and EMS Department, there's going to be a resolution on the council agenda next week authorizing the SOFD to exceed the levy limit, or to exercise, rather, the CPI plus 2% levy provision that state law allows for. This will add $71,000 plus to the city levy for next year, and will give the department the ability and the resources to pursue the long-range funding plan and staffing plan that was part of the intergovernmental agreement executed in 2022. As part of the budget deliberations at the Southern Ozaki Fire and EMS board level, ambulance fees are also being adjusted, and those are based on a survey that was conducted by our ambulance billing company. The city capital contribution, as I mentioned, is increasing because we want to start to get ahead on some of the longer-term funding needs we're going to have from an ambulance and an engine standpoint. There's a building rental payment that I pointed out earlier coming back to the city, and we're going to be hiring one additional firefighter or paramedic next year to continue to give the chief the chess pieces he needs to make sure that we're adequately staffed 24/7, 365 with full-time personnel that are not otherwise paid on call and frankly in a position where they can decide to come in or not. We have much more control over full-time personnel, and we've really seen an uptick in our staffing levels to the point where we're at 98, 99% year over year. And our response times continue to come down, which is really a favorable outcome. Lastly, an outside consultant that was brought in last year to help us work with some discussions at the command staff level recommended that we pursue a subscription to Lexipol. That would help us with policy development for the department. We're a nascent department that's growing over time, and as we mature, we need to make sure we have policies in place to govern these full-time personnel. It's also going to help us with training and wellness and maybe even some grant writing. So that's probably about a $20,000 expense that the board really wanted to see in the budget for next year. In terms of taxpayer impact relative to the budget that's being recommended to the Appropriations Committee this evening, the operating levy is increasing by just under $350,000, which is about 2.95%. Last year, for reference purposes, the levy increased by about $320,000. The citywide revaluation that was completed just a few months ago will result in a $650,000 home, which is the median price for a home here in Mequon, paying about $1,600 in taxes to the city. The tax rate adjustment, as was pointed out in the cover letter with the budget materials, is dropping significantly. We're going mid-twos on the tax rate from 319, where we are this year. State manufacturing values for all of the manufacturing property here in Mequon are still pending. That's a small portion of our overall tax base. And we don't think it'll have a material effect on the budget that we're presenting here tonight. And as we discussed at our strategic planning workshop two years ago, the sewer levy will remain flat pending budget consideration in early November. And just for reference purposes, as we often talk about here at the appropriations level, any upward adjustment to the tax rate equivalent to 1 penny would result in $70,000 of additional revenue to work with. But I say that knowing that we're up against the levy limit. We don't have a lot of headroom in terms of increasing the levy. With the staffing that we've done over the last number of years, going in or preceding the establishment of the Southern Ozaki Fire and EMS Department, we've really exercised the excess levy capacity that we have. And to the extent that we have any, and I'm still waiting for an answer on that, my gut is to just roll it forward to next year in the event that we need it. So I'll stop there before we jump into ARPA. I'm almost done with my slides, and then obviously, Mayor, I'll be turning it over to you and the rest of the council for discussion and deliberation.
All right.
Any questions on the operating budget?
I have a question.
Yes.
So you said this earlier, that fringe benefits were down $42,000. That a result of what? Why would you go there? Efficiencies or that's what I'm thinking.
Well, the big driver on fringe benefits is health insurance. And under the Employee Trust Fund, which is the health insurance program administered by the state of Wisconsin, there are 3 plans that are available to employees. Most of our employees are on the lower cost plan, which is lower cost for both the city and the employees that are participating. We do see some employees on the higher cost plans, but those premiums continue to increase. And over time, most, if not all employees have migrated to the lower cost plan, which saves us money. Additionally, and this depends a lot in terms of where hiring is going, there's a big difference, or a big swing rather, between single health insurance and family health insurance. And just based on the churn that we see relative to any one year in terms of employee turnover, we may see increased costs or decreased costs relative to health insurance because an employee coming into the organization is choosing single insurance versus family insurance. We also have some employees that come into the organization that have health insurance through their spouse, and they choose not to pay premiums or a premium contribution out of their checks because they already have insurance coverage coming into the organization. So a lot of it is really based on what we're seeing with employees coming and leaving.
Is that something you're looking into, the health insurance?
We are.
Because I know that, just looking at the notes from last year, that's one of the things that you talked about, that looking at insurances to see if not to reduce insurance, but for the employees, if there's costs, some maybe look at it to see if there's some efficiencies.
We talked about it. You can see our benefits and our staff costs are in the neighborhood of about $4 million, and a lot of that is health insurance. So that's a big chunk of our budget. Admittedly, I probably got out a little over my skis in making that a budget goal for 2025, not fully appreciating the fact that I had a brand new finance director who needed a full year to go through the budget and the audit and everything that happens cyclically over a 12-month period. before she's in a position to start tackling special projects. I would anticipate the new finance, or the new assistant city administrator who starts next week will be teaming up with the finance department, and we'll be able to tackle that project full bore in 2026.
See, I don't want to take away benefits, I just want to
No.
make sure that we're getting.
Yeah, I think the goal would be a similar plan, just reduce cost to the
Because
city.
I know that it keeps on going up, and it's nice that it didn't go up as much this year as opposed to years previous.
Well, we have what's known as a fully insured plan, and we are subject to the premium increases, and all costs are fully insured. But there are companies and organizations, and even municipalities for that matter, that do not utilize a fully insured model, whereby the organization or the employer takes on some risk relative to health insurance costs and relies on the participants to do some things that can help bring costs down for the benefit of everybody. The coverage may be the same, but there may be a health reimbursement account that employees can actually build money in and then use on a portable basis, either in retirement or if they go to work someplace else. So there are a lot of consumer oriented health plans that we want to look at and examine and analyze, and I would anticipate that the group, the leadership team, will probably be working with a cross-section of employees across all departments, and this will be a collaborative organization-wide effort to examine what is best for the city and what is best for our employees. Sure. All right, so ARPA. We included some spreadsheets in the budget materials which show that we've spent or encumbered a majority of the amount of $2.5 million that we were awarded a couple of years ago. And you can see in the column, the middle column there, our allocation and how the council approved our spending plan a couple of years ago. And then the amount in that middle column that's either been spent or encumbered, which leaves the remaining amount of money in the very far right-hand column. And so we've got a little money left over on police items that we've otherwise paid for. The county line traffic signal, we got a reimbursement of about $180,000. Well, it was less than that, but we didn't spend all the money that we allocated. Bottom line, we've got about $180,000 that we haven't used on the county line traffic signal that we can talk about here tonight. The land management system, we've spent or encumbered about $350,000 of the $525,000 that was earmarked. We are going to easily spend the remaining $170,000 on GIS considerations, on kiosks that we're going to have set up for folks coming into City Hall and needing to fill out a building permit. We've got other equipment needs that the city staff is going to need in terms of performing online reviews. I would anticipate that all of that money is going to get spent, as well as the Civic Campus Master Plan, which we'll be talking about next week during Committee of the Whole. The other money down at the bottom, the Munis module implementation, with the fleet management software project kicking off next year, there may be some ancillary expenses that I would presume we'll probably spend there. So I would encourage the council to focus their time and their attention here tonight on those top two numbers, which when you add them together is about $185,000, $186,000 that we need to reallocate and use by the end of 2026. So we've got about 14 months. And as we've treated it along most of all of these other spending categories, this is one-time revenue. So we want to be careful in terms of how we allocate this money. We want to spend it within the time frame specified, but we also want to make sure that we're not creating a recurring obligation for the city that's going to have to otherwise come out of the operating budget long term. So here are some of the suggestions that the departments shared over the last week to 10 days to 2 weeks rather, in terms of how we could allocate some of that money. We're going to be participating in a county-wide housing study with all of the other municipalities across Ozaukee County. The city's committed $5,000 to that effort for 2026. Chief Riley identified a couple of fixed radar signs at Oriole Lane School to the tune of about $6,000. Director Tollefson included this next item on the supplemental funding list included in the budget. That would involve fixing 5 of the streetlights over by the new Uleo Creek development at the corner of Highland and Port Washington Road. And then, as I mentioned, we're replacing the citywide server system in 2026. The IT division and even Mr. Shinneman, before he left, strongly urged the city to consider replacement of the police department server system as well. By federal law, we must maintain 2 separate server systems between our police department and the rest of the city. Law enforcement has to be on their own server system. And that server system is about 6 to 7 years old as well. And we'd like to maybe tackle that one-time project with some of these proceeds. And so the items shaded in green would be my recommendation for the council to strongly consider those expenses to be part of the recast ARPA plan for 2026. Below that, you can see some other expenses, some of which have a dollar amount appended to them, others which would probably require some additional research to get a better cost estimate or cost figure. But these were the items that staff and the department heads shared with the budget team before we came into this meeting here tonight.
Hey, Will,
Yeah,
why do we have to do a countywide housing study, and what's wrong with the Uleo Creek lights?
well, I'm going to let Director Tollefson talk about the Uleo Creek lights if she wants to come up here. But the Ozaki Economic Development Board has identified workforce housing as one of the major impediments to growing the economy here in Ozaki County over the next 20 years pursuant to the new strategic plan they just approved here earlier this year. And so there's a move afoot on the part of Ozaki Economic Development, and the city of Mequon is a member of that organization, to do a county-wide housing study to understand where the gaps are in housing relative to the missing middle, as they call it, mid-priced housing that's not either on the lower end or the higher end, but the missing middle. And so being good partners and looking at some residential development here, both in the short term and longer term, the Director of Community Development, myself, and I think I'll speak for the mayor, all think that $5,000 to participating in a county-wide effort may give us really good data for long-term planning in terms of how we handle zoning and residential developments that may present into the future.
Maybe. Oh, are the other municipalities contributing the same amount? Is that the, okay.
Yeah.
I think we'd be the most notable absence if we didn't participate. And it's not committing us to any policy change, it's just getting data.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
Bringing in an outside consultant.
Yep, just trying to understand. What about the lights or those?
Director Tollefson, I'll give you the floor on the
kids
light.
with slingshots.
Sure, when we created the new zoning districts for Uleo Creek, we also talked about public improvements and streetscaping elements, sidewalk, landscaping along the public streets. One of those elements were street lights. The subcommittee of Planning Commission authorized a particular style of light. Those are developer installed at the time of the projects. The first project that went in was the Ascension Medical Office. The spec of the light did not include a shield, and the first several months that those lights were installed, there was a lot of negative reaction from the public about those. So we spent some time with the developer and the lighting consultant who installed those and went through a number of iterations of fixes. And they have been working well with us, and we have actually found a solution and corrected one of the 6 lights that were installed. And so the remaining 5 lights need a retrofit in order to not see the source of the light, so you're not actually seeing the bulb in the globe. The subdivision that's occurred beyond that has now installed the new spec, and so we don't continue to have this issue, but we'd like to go back and fix those others.
Great, I recall some of the complaints.
Yeah.
That came in on those lights, so that makes a lot of sense. And then, may I keep going just while Director Tollison's here?
Go for it, yeah.
And on the same list, the LMS GIS consultant is one of the things on my mind is we're implementing this really complicated system, and you put on your list that you need a part-time person to administer this really complicated system. So I'm a little confused who's going to be administering it, and maybe that this is the perfect opportunity to get you the support to successfully launch.
Yeah,
that
so
system.
in this list, the GIS consultant is really related to taking our GIS data, that it can be dumped into the system and consistently used in the system. That's a separate issue than the actual staff resource. This is also a list of ARPA funds, so I couldn't include on this list any salary or personnel long-term services because that wouldn't be permitted per the ARPA funding. That has to be a one-time expenditure. So you did see on the other requests for funding, and that was included in last year's budget too, the consideration of staffing resources for ELMS going forward. Data management is critical. The maintenance of that data going forward is critical. The executive committee that's working collectively on this LMS project has yet to meet about some of those needs. So that might be something, that personnel or staffing might be something that will be coming forward probably post adoption of this budget.
Okay. Well, I'm interested in doing it right.
Yeah, thank you.
And then I guess one final thing on your supplemental request is about 430,000. Obviously, it's not on this list or on the budget recommended list, but the 430,000 in document retention, and it's kind of ridiculous. It's even on that list. We're never ever going to do that. And I was just thinking about it a lot because of all the flooding that we've had recently. I've also had to come into city development for my own business. It took the city about a week to find plans. I really appreciated the efforts, and then when we actually find the plans, the only thing a developer per prospect can do is like take a picture of them. There's no way to copy them or get it digitally scanned. So for me, this would be a really neat opportunity to do some kind of printing scale scanner copier system for community development that allows us to gradually scan plans and upload them to GIS as we're doing this, and also to provide another customer service aspect in community development department. So I thought that might be something tangible that we could look at.
We had a plotter scanner that included the ability to scan that size scale documents. When that failed and a new plotter was selected for purchase, it didn't include the component of the smaller scanning documents. There was some analysis done about the frequency of requesting those plans and having it scanned, and I think it added a $300 a month cost to the lease of that plotter. So there was some staff level decision making to not include that at the time. The 430 was outreach to a consultant, and that only included taking all of our single family home plans that we have archived and getting those electronically scanned, electronically stored, and then disposal of the actual hard copy. So that didn't even touch our archives related to commercial development. So you're right, that is a large scale project. There would have to be some numbers put together about what that would really mean for current staff or temporary help to come in and scan all of those documents. The department doesn't have the resources to dedicate current staff to be doing that at this time, and probably not in the near future either. But to your point, there haven't been those other conversations and costs of project of that nature yet.
Okay. Well, I just wanted to throw out there, I thought it'd be a good investment in the department, and we're one of the few municipalities that can't produce plans readily or allow people to copy them or scan them. So this seemed like a good one-time expense to look into from my perspective.
Alderman Meyer.
Going back to the increased streetlights, in
I think that was the installer's error, and I think that is why the consultants have been working with us so closely to help find a solution for that. But the development agreement related to that particular installation doesn't allow us to go back to the extent that we need to get these fixed. So this is a dollar amount that includes that partnership to get it fixed. But we're taking some ownership of it because we own those fixtures now. They are in our ownership.
So it was not installed correctly to specifications, and then, but we're still paying,
Yeah.
okay.
A portion of it, they are contributing part of it as well.
Alderman Bach.
So are those the 5 lights at that Ascension property?
Yes.
That's what we're talking about?
Yes,
And so is that the standard going forward?
yes.
So like the golf course on the other side of the street is not under that, they have different lighting versus or
The Uleo Creek design guidelines require those streetlights along the
The-
8-foot wide
Got it.
asphalt sidewalk, which is only on the west side.
okay,
And then it does require the developer property owner at the time of construction to install that same streetlight at their driveway entrance, whether you're on the east side or the west side. So there will be synergy, at least along the public street,
Streets,
on
yeah.
both sides of the street.
got it, thank you, perfect.
Alderman Strelchuk.
So, Will, you and I talked earlier, and the number one complaint that I get in my district, we've got equal amount of residents per constituency based on district, but I've got 40-something% of the land mass, 41%. And my number one complaint outside of if there's an issue or something coming forward is speeding on the roads. I had a particular resident in specific on Friedstadt come forward and share his frustration as traffic was being, prior to it being rerouted on Mequon Road, and then the Mequon Road rerouting added to the aggravation of that. I had the chief go out and sit and patrol, but as you know, that labor cost is exponentially high, and they're tapped as it is, and they're needed elsewhere, within the city. They can't just park in one spot and do different things. We have fixed radar signs that we're talking about for Oriole Lane School, which I think are great. In this discussion, I identified that we have 2 signs that go on a rotation to, I think, 12 different sites throughout the city. But they don't sit all in one spot, and these are all traffic concern areas. And I know each one of us gets feedback from our district with regards to that. I'd like to earmark $50,000 to go towards fixed radar signs that are solar backup, that can be more, they don't have to be permanently placed, we can call them temporary, but again, the type that works with a solar and a battery, and then it shows your speed and it allows people to slow down with the flexibility of the police as they needed to maybe rotate them on occasion and things like that, to address some of these concerns through the ARPA funds that are, we're getting back in. Community safety is our number one priority as a community. This is one way that I think that we can address that at less the half of the cost, a one-time cost with ongoing minor maintenance towards what even like one police officer would even cost with benefits. So that's my recommendation, that we have added in here as a dog-eared something.
Well, I'll point out, we're approving the operating budget for next year. We're not approving modifications to the ARPA list, but we can definitely tee it up for discussion. I mean,
Yeah,
I'm a fan of the radar signs, but I think it'd be worth, we had a couple of portable ones we bought last year. We're talking about putting some fixed ones in. I think it'd be wise if public safety in the coming months, maybe a couple months from now, maybe next month's too quick, have a review of how it's going and what we're seeing, and it maybe 50,000 is not the right number, but like have a more structured policy discussion about it. We have about $180,000, as Will stated, that we're not going to expend because I negotiated half our money back from the state for the intersection lights at Port Washington and County Line. So that gives us a little more flexibility to take on some things. But there's a list of other things too that we should talk about. I'm not saying that it's a bad idea. I'm generally for
No.
a little pleasant reminder that you're traveling far too fast, as we see it in all of our districts.
And Mayor, this was obviously not the key focus for the budget team in terms of putting together
Correct,
the
yeah.
operating and the spending plan for next year. But we feel this is an opportune time to have this kind of discussion because it is available funding. It is one-time funding.
Right.
And to the extent that we can tie the two together,
Yep.
I think that works to everybody's benefit. And what our intent here tonight was to really just introduce the discussion. To the extent that the council is ready to make any decisions or commitments relative to funding or the use of those available funds rather, tonight, that's great. But there's nothing to say that it has to be tonight. We'd like to give all of you an opportunity to brainstorm and come back and maybe even email myself and the finance director with any thoughts that you have. We can aggregate those and potentially take some time either at a committee of the whole meeting coming up, say next month, or in December, and finalize once and for all how we're gonna utilize that $185,000 going into next year. Again, recognizing it's one-time money and we have to spend it by December 31st of '26.
Yeah, and just one add-on thing. Almost each instance of people that were really kind of upset with the speeding and the fact that they just didn't think that that was going to come under control as we take this up in committee. If we can evaluate just a vehicle in which, if the public wants to fund it and put it in their, in their subdivision or on that road, what our parameters would be for, let's say approval. I would recommend that it gets turned over to the city to follow city sign ordinances and things like that. But, those are just one add-on thing. I don't want to get off topic too deep and talk about all the nuances, but since we're talking about in a future committee meeting, I just think those points would be other ones that we could bring up. I made a promise that I'd bring it up at the first budget meeting. If you don't ask for budget for things that are critical that you're getting strong resident feedback for early and often, sometimes that gets missed or pushed off a year. This is one I don't want to see pushed off a year if we can help it.
Just a clarification, public safety spends a lot of time talking about speeding. And we brought Director Lundin in on this at one point because it kind of crossed over in that area. And we'll continue to do that. So I think I would send this to the committee and we can keep talking about it. Just to clarify, any resident can go on the website and request that those movable signs come into their neighborhood. So I don't think that doesn't necessarily have 12 fixed areas. If some subdivision said, hey, we'd like to have it in our area, they could go onto the website, they could request that. Am I correct on that?
And staff's under direction from public welfare on their work plan to bring this back.
Yeah, that's right.
This is an active
It's great.
policy discussion.
Yeah, so there'll be some
It should be
opportunities.
always an update 1 year into.
Well,
So-
I owe a lot, I need a little staff, but I owe a lot and I promised that I would bring forward, Alderman Parrish had suggested kind of a better guidance for residents about, what the process is when they do go through a request, because we have a process, number one, to validate there is speeding, because, data indicates that often residents think people are driving too fast and they are in fact not. So, we certainly want, any permanent infrastructure to be data-driven and based, so we need to be able to make sure that the process is initiated by that, and to incorporate better advertisement of what the process is to get the temporary feedback signs, and then to provide some guidance and parameters in terms of the steps of what would be done before we start throwing these signs up all over, because then if they're not impactful or effective, if they're installed everywhere, they will be just like the speed limit signs, and they will be.
That's a good summary. And the discussion also includes speed bumps. It's not
Yes.
just the radar. So.
Yes, to your point, I requested that it be evaluated in terms of traffic calming. We shouldn't be isolating ourselves to one methodology of what we're gonna install, because the road geometry, whether the road is an arterial or a subdivision road or a local or a collector, all play into what an effective traffic controlling, response may be.
So in specific, I'm talking about the signs that you put on Bonnie Roll Road.
Yeah, correct. Those we have a process for and everything, but the original policy discussion was that the fixed radar ones would only be considered in school zones, because otherwise we need some parameters to otherwise consider where they would be installed for everyone. We'll request them on every street, everywhere throughout the city.
Great.
But then they won't work.
Can I make a recommendation, we just shelf
Alderman
this now
Meyer,
into
yeah.
the next committee of the whole and get into appropriations, you know, so we can
Yeah.
move on?
We're getting a longer description, my apologies.
So,
It'll be
couple ideas
addressed.
for how to dispose of the leftover ARPA funds. We can pick that up, not at next committee of the whole, but maybe the one after that.
So Mayor, might I suggest that we give members of the Appropriations Committee the rest of this month
Sure.
to brainstorm and then to send any suggestions about what they'd like to see on a list of items for consideration. And then we can schedule some appropriate time, either in November
Or December, yeah.
or December. We've got several meetings coming up. We've got next week's October monthly council meeting, which will be devoted mostly to the Civic Campus Master Plan work done by the Lakota Group. We're going to have a sewer and water budget meeting, likely the first week of November. And we may have some time there to pick up this conversation. And then we've got our regular monthly meetings in November and December. There's nothing to say we have to have this done by the time we adopt the budget. We have to have this done by the end of the year, but it would be good to have a plan so as to give staff or a standing committee or a commission appropriate time to vet policies or other implementation considerations that need to be considered before we pull the trigger on spending this money.
Great.
So if the committee's amenable, we'd happily take your suggestions now through the end of the month.
Alderman Brett.
Yeah, thank you for this presentation, this chance to have a conversation. I do wonder if we're thinking about this ARPA allocation, you know, there's no mention, there's the assumption that the pool will be open next year here on site. We know we had a one-time expense last year. I think there's commitment of our council to fund it again. So I think we could expect that funding to be needed for any system, you know, if something goes. So that's one thing to think about. I also wonder, I know we've had robust conversations about public safety and facilities. Does it make sense to consider whether we would use funds for any design for the East Side Fire Station? You know, we seem to have some sort of broad consensus on an East Side location. I don't know if we could spend the design money, or would it even be enough to upgrade that location within the ARPA window? So just thoughts on that potentially as another use.
Great idea.
A great idea for sure to get on it, but I think there's many other financial vehicles we could use too. And yeah, I think Will and I talked about this afternoon. I think as we talked about in the financial planning workshop, was that 2 months ago or so now? July. Maybe 3 months ago. We're going to come back after budget time and kind of do a reset on all the public safety facilities discussions, the facility condition report, the location analysis, and get everyone back up to a level set of understanding and then develop a plan to attack that. A good way to pay for the plans and what's left in there after we nibble away with a few other things probably isn't enough to do all the plans, but we've done this before, like with TID 3, when it was deficit spending for a while, we did an internal transfer from another account. And then when we bond for the replacement of that facility, you could just pay off the internal transfer for the design fee. So we've got lots of money in the bank on other things that we can just reallocate and pay ourselves back. Certainly having a more holistic approach to how we go after all the public safety needs. There's no doubt the East Side Fire Station is long in the tooth. But I think it warrants more discussion It's the one I'm certainly eager to get going on, but I think we gotta get through the year. I mean, Will's still staffing up his office again, and get that stabilized in the early part of next year, I think is a good time to have that discussion and kind of do a reset. And that's kind of what we talked about doing at the financial workshop, and that's kind of sticking to that plan for the time being. And it hasn't been forgot about, it's just the tyranny of the urgent that is the budget is consumed, as it does everywhere, every year, all men and women on deck for a couple months late in the summer, so. Which leads us to tonight. But yes, I think we need to keep focused on that early in 2026, for sure.
So we'll take any and all suggestions through the end of this month, and then thereafter, that'll give staff a chance to review what's been submitted, and then provide any context relative to those suggestions when we pick up the conversation as a group at the next meeting, when we get to that. Looking ahead to 2026, the mayor just talked a little bit about getting back on the long-range financial planning train. We're looking to do that, if not here in the fourth quarter, certainly early in the first quarter, once we've addressed some of our existing staffing vacancies. We talked a little earlier with Alderman Hancher about the health insurance option review. We've also talked about advancing residential development projects. We've certainly got Highland Meadows underway, Swan Ridge is underway. Those projects will continue into 2026. And then I think we're gonna have another proposal coming forward on the Jansen property in the south central portion of the city, as that works its way through the approval process. Considering alternative revenue sources, we talked about this, not only at strategic planning 18 months ago, but at our planning workshop a couple months back. We're looking to make some adjustments to the fee schedule. That has been a largely static document in the almost 11 years that I've served as city administrator. We've made some surgical modifications to various fees over time, but we've never done a wholesale, let's call it an inflationary adjustment to most, if not all, of our fees. That's something we looked at going into the budget development process here this year, but without the additional resources on the budget team currently, we just didn't have the time to see that through. But that's something we want to look at in terms of maintaining expenditure flexibility going into 2026, and then furthering energy efficiency initiatives. You don't hear the loud roar of air moving in this room like you used to. We've got the solar panels over at the library. All of those investments are saving us money, not only in the current year, but in the next 20 years that we have to put together budgets. So we want to continue to focus on that, because when you add it all together, it's not an insignificant amount of money. And then our next steps, as I just outlined a moment ago, we're here tonight as the Appropriations Committee. Next Tuesday, we've got our council meeting. If we need another Appropriations Committee, we've got 2 dates selected that we could get on the calendar if necessary. Our public hearing notice is due to the newspaper on October 20th. It needs to be published by no later than October 23rd. We're looking at that first week of November for our sewer and water budget meetings. And then we're looking to adopt the budget on November 11th so that we can get the tax levy filed or the tax levies filed with the county. And then we can begin the process of generating the property tax bills, which then go out late November, early December. So we're on a timeline. This is a process that most of us are familiar with from past years. And we would gladly open it up to any other questions from the committee at this point.
Thank you, Will. Alderman Strelchak.
So the biggest question that the public's had with the assessment, right, is how much are my taxes going to go up? So in summary, what are we seeing here as far as, where we're sitting on that, just for the public's sake, that I know they're listening.
Well, going back to the taxpayer impact slide, and correct me here, Ms. Arnett, $650,000 is the median home price in Mequon that our financial advisor, Brian Raymer, used to provide the council with an example in terms of what the tax impact would be going into next year.
So year over year, what's the change? Same?
It's hard to say because the values have all been reset.
Last year, they used
Okay.
450,000 at a mill rate of 311. Here they're using 650, so it's not quite comparable, but I think on average.
So they're looking at an increase year over year.
they're
On
gonna see a
base.
Decrease in their tax
A
rate.
decrease
this year
in 200.
compared to
The
last
tax
year.
rate is decreasing by 69 cents.
Okay, good. Okay.
You know, it's going to affect different homeowners and different property owners.
If my house was assessed at $500,000 5 years ago, and it's assessed at $500,000 this year, what are my taxes last year to this year? Was
Your taxes are likely going to go down.
Yeah, they're gonna go down, okay. Or if it goes
Well,
up.
it's not likely your
yeah.
value's the same over 5 years
The
either.
levy percent is what, like, so if the levy percent goes up 40%, and then the house value goes up 40%, the house tax rate should remain the same.
Yeah, maybe go back to the overall levy.
I think they're gonna.
Can you do the math for the next meeting so that we can, just on a slide? Just for a baseline?
Sure.
Because the only thing people are gonna see is that we're raising taxes or lowering taxes or, you know, and they're not gonna know.
So what you're saying is that your house last year was valued at 450. Now it is valued at 590. And the last year you were paying this much in taxes. Next year you're gonna be paying this much. You know, some samples like that, you know, some.
Well, I think the really quick answer though is at the top of the slide.
Yeah,
I mean, taxes are up 2.9%, but some of that includes net new construction. So it's not much.
So your
Everyone
tax,
thinks, oh, my assessment up 40%, my taxes are going up 40%. That's not how it
It's
works.
really the levy that drives the tax.
It
property
is.
tax
It's
bill.
just the levy divided by all the equalized value in the city, and a number pops out the back end.
so it's fair to say that your taxes may go up
Yeah, this,
3%, but it's gonna vary.
it's gonna vary.
it's based on assessment.
Yeah,
They may stay flat, they may go down.
it may go down.
Some will go down, some will stay about the same, and some will go up a little bit.
There's just gotta be some baseline statement, like, if the levy went up 40% and your home value went up 40%, conceptually, you should pay the same year over year.
The best canned calculation is the old median home price and the old mill rate, and the new median home price and the new mill rate.
Yeah,
And it's not gonna be universally true for everyone,
Okay.
but it'll be directionally correct.
You get questions, just remind people that the city, the most of the property tax bill is school district. So we,
It'd be nice just to print out or have a PDF of the slide that's provided that I've asked for and just email it to them. That's the easiest for sure. You know, just, hey, here's how it was calculated, here's the math behind it, you know what I mean? And then we can address, you know, if it goes up more than they think, or their assessment went up more than they thought that it should, you know, then I can work with the city and the resident to address that moving forward. So that's just what I'm looking for something to communicate, just overly simplify it. When it comes to taxes, they don't understand math is hard, the hashtag math is hard. They want to know the facts and how it pertains to them. So just an ask if we could.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bet.
Alderman Parrish.
I think overall, I'm really pleased with the budget. Thank you to staff. Will, you did a nice job with this, and then the finance department. I think this was fine, skipping the preliminary workshop meeting. You were able to put together a good budget without that. So I definitely don't see too many areas we could cut, so to speak. I think we used to go down that path, and it just leads to deferred maintenance, so to speak, where there's just things accumulating and the lists of needs grow every year. And I don't know, this is the first year where I mean, like you said, about half the staff's asks got met. That never used to happen. And our list of purchases, requirements, those seem to be going down. So I do feel like there's some progress being made. So thank you for that. Thank you for your progress on the Thiensville Library Agreement. I didn't have to go on my annual diatribe about that. It is still concerning, you know, we are increasing it by $25,000 and they're flat every year for the last 5 years. So rebating some of the fiscal agent fee is, I think that's a really good start. And then just a reminder that we don't charge the fiscal agent fee to SOFD because we're the fiscal agent for that. So there's still a lot of inequities in the agreement. And I think you have the full support of council as you go and negotiate the library agreement this year to something that's fair and not where they're paying less than 9%, because that's not fair. Thank you.
Agreed.
Thank you.
And just for those interested, I pulled up the packet from the Appropriations Committee meeting from a year ago, because for some reason I have them all archived in my laptop.
Because you're awesome.
I just take them from the directory for the next meeting and move them into the archive folder, and they're all there all the time. In the packet last year, and we can check if this is accurate or not, we were projecting there was the median, it was just a Mequon home assessed at $450,000. Maybe that wasn't the median home. But a Mequon home assessed at $450,000 would pay approximately $1,435 in city taxes. But that doesn't say it's the median home. But you can go do some quick math on that, and you could even back it out. It doesn't even have to be a median. You can figure out the rates and stuff. So the answer is not much, but will everyone's bill change a little bit? Yes. For the most part, it's going to stay somewhere around the same, maybe up a little, maybe down a little, depending on where you fell, because not everyone's assessment went up the same, and then manufacturing commercial is probably down a little bit, which pushes more pressure on the single-family homeowners, so there's multiple pieces moving at the same time, which makes it hard to give a succinct answer for every property in one canned statement, but.
Okay.
That's all I've got. Any other questions from council, or we do need to come out of here with a recommendation to the council, so if someone would like to make a motion.
A motion for approval, or?
It was just a motion to recommend it on the council, then we can put that hat on another time.
Second.
I'd make that motion.
Okay, there's a motion and a second. Any further comments or questions from the committee? Hearing none, please call the roll.
Alderman Strelchak,
Aye.
Alderman Talako, Alderman Meyer,
Aye.
Alderman Hancher,
Aye.
Alderman Bach,
Aye.
Alderman Parrish,
Aye.
Alderman Brad,
Aye.
Alderman Gebhardt.
Aye.
Good work.
Mayor Nurbin.
Aye. That just leaves one motion left this evening. Someone would like to do the honors?
Second.
Motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, we're adjourned.
There you go. You got a perfect timing, boss.
Thank you.
When did the other meetings finalize?
We waited to do